This is how I opened my restaurant. I was working on it for 2.5 years. Finally had it done. There were so many things I didn't know I had to do. And this is exactly how it happened. I'm standing there like, and people thought I was crazy. Like, what is he doing in there? What is he, And I was like, I'm standing behind the pizza table and I'm like, all right, I got, I loaded the refrigerator up with soda and, I had my everything. And I was like, I called my landlord. They lived upstairs. I said, can you guys come down tonight? I didn't even call my family, friends, nothing. Just, I took the paper down off the windows, the construction, I had everything covered, cleaned the windows, called them up, says, can you come down tonight and eat? Make it look like we're open. She's like, what do you mean you're opening tonight? Because, they thought I was crazy. And I was like, yeah. And they came in, they sat down, I made them a pizza, and about, half hour later, the place was half full. And I think people were just curious.
Yeah.
To what I was doing in there. This
boarded up for 2 years.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
what's going
people
on in
walking
there?
by the place every day, coming home from work, and unintentionally, it was like this unveiling, but without telling anybody. So they were walking by and and they came in, and like an hour later, half the tables were full. Another hour, every table was taken. I did maybe 14 tables that night. It wasn't much. And then word just spread like wildfire.
Knowing what you know now about what it takes to run Lucali, you obviously ended up in a good spot. Would you do it the same way again?
What do you mean?
Like the same thought process that I want to work for myself and I want it to be pizza. Would you make the same choices again when you started it, knowing where you're going to end up?
Would I change it?
Or just like you change your approach at the beginning if you knew what was involved in it?
No. I mean, if I was to open up a new place here, things, I have to do things different now,
Yeah.
But I always get nervous, even like whenever I'm doing something. Like even when I opened up Miami, like my thought process was pizza, calzone, leave me alone. That's all I'm making. And when I opened up there, no, it didn't work. So I had to pivot. Down there, it was like, you don't have the pizza craze, but we created a pizza craze. But people were like scratching their head. I want a salad. I want other things. It was big for a lot of, European and South Americans at the time coming to eat, back in 2013. And yeah, I had to pivot. And that's something I've become really good at, pivoting, that I'm learning a lot about, and just not making myself crazy anymore. Just worry about it when I get there, and we always manage to get through it.
I read a quote somewhere. You said, Lucali was built for you, not for the customer. Is there any truth to that?
For me?
That's what it said. Is that accurate?
Maybe building Lucali, I was kind of like in, the construction business and especially in the marble and fabricating. And I've always been obsessed with construction. I mean, as a kid, I remember, I'm talking like 8, 9, 10 years old, roaming the neighborhood at construction sites. I loved to build things. And one of the things was, if I could build a house, I could build a pizza. That was my thought process, and figure it out, But it was a labor of love building Lucali. Other than my daughter, it's my only other work of art, the actual location. That place is a complete gut renovation. Every nail, you stood in the cellar, you saw all the way up to the 3rd floor. I just ripped the place out and designed it and built everything. Every screw, nail was me.
So you love that process itself.
Yeah, that's, now that I think about it, I think, I was into design and all that, and I think it was more of like a showroom for me to get started in my own construction business, believe it or not, And then pizza was a second thought, and pizza just took off.